guttural chant echoing through torchlit tunnels. A drip of blood splashes into wine. Then, the scrape of steel in total darkness. This isn't a legend or a movie. This is the Blood Sect, the forbidden cult that terrified Chinese emperors for 2,000 years. You've heard of secret societies, but never one like this. These weren't just rebels. They were a weaponized religion developed over 2 millennia, waging a holy war against the very idea of imperial rule. Modern extremists? They'd look tame next to the Blood Sect, a cult so organized, emperors called them the empire's living nightmare. Behind the polished image of imperial harmony hid a network of fanatical cults, secret armies that toppled dynasties and drove emperors mad with paranoia. This wasn't chaos. It was a calculated revolution, a science of faith that weaponized belief itself. Today, we're diving into the brutal truth of China's most feared secret societies, organizations so terrifying that the mere mention of their names could get you tortured to death. This is the story of how peasant preachers turned religious devotion into the ultimate weapon of mass destruction. This is the story of the Blood Sect. But here's what most people don't realize about these so-called religious groups. They weren't praying for salvation. They were engineering the apocalypse. Picture the scene. Rural China, 184 CE. A charismatic healer named Zhang Jue stands before thousands of desperate peasants, but he's not offering hope. He's offering revolution. "The blue sky is dead," he screams. "The yellow sky will rise." This wasn't just religious rhetoric. It was a declaration of war against the Han dynasty itself. Zhang Jue had created something the world had never seen before, a militarized death cult with 360,000 fanatical followers, all bound by blood oaths, and convinced that killing for their faith would guarantee eternal paradise. The Yellow Turban Rebellion didn't just challenge imperial authority. It shattered the Han dynasty so completely that China wouldn't be unified again for nearly 4 centuries. Archaeological evidence reveals mass graves containing tens of thousands of bodies, entire cities wiped off the map by peasants who believed they were doing God's work. Chinese military records describe battles where Yellow Turban fighters would charge imperial cavalry barehanded, screaming prayers as they were cut down, convinced their deaths would speed the coming of their prophesied golden age. The cruelty lay not in sadism, but in utilitarian efficiency. This was warfare as religious sacrament. Get this, the real weapon wasn't swords or spears. It was a ritual so psychologically powerful that it could turn a rice farmer into a suicide bomber overnight. Torchlight flickers across carved walls. Dozens of hooded figures chant as a bronze bowl fills, drop by drop, with blood and wine. But this isn't ordinary wine. It's been mixed with the blood of every person in that room. The initiation ceremony of the Blood Sect was designed to do more than create loyalty. It was designed to destroy the initiate's previous identity completely. Here's how it worked. New members would slice their palms with consecrated daggers, letting their blood drip into the communal bowl. Then they would drink from it while swearing an oath that superseded every other loyalty, to family, to emperor, to life itself. Modern researchers call this ritual one of history's earliest forms of psychological reprogramming. The blood oath created what researchers call sacred fusion, a psychological state where the individual literally ceases to exist as a separate entity. Historical accounts from the Ming Dynasty show that captured Blood Sect members would endure the most horrific tortures without revealing a single name or location. They weren't being brave. Their minds had been systematically rewired to view betrayal as literally impossible. The ritual didn't just create loyalty, it created sleeper agents who could vanish into society for decades, waiting for a signal. Blood Sect members could live normal lives for decades, working as merchants, scholars, even government officials, waiting for the signal to activate. But it gets worse. These weren't just isolated uprisings. The Blood Sect had perfected something that wouldn't appear in European warfare until the 20th century: generational warfare. Picture the sheer ambition of it. While European peasants were dying of plague, Chinese secret societies were playing a game that spanned centuries. They infiltrated the bureaucracy, stockpiled weapons, and waited, sometimes for generations, to strike. The Red Turban Rebellion of 1351 is the perfect example. White Lotus ideology, the theological foundation of the Blood Sect, had been spreading underground for over 200 years. When the Mongol Yuan dynasty showed signs of weakness, the signal went out. Then, across China, rebellion erupted like synchronized explosions, a 1,000-year plan finally coming to life. Simultaneous uprisings erupted in dozens of provinces. Government arsenals were seized by their own guards. Imperial armies found themselves fighting enemies who knew their every move because Blood Sect members had been feeding them intelligence for generations. The sound was like thunder rolling across the Chinese landscape. The systematic collapse of Mongol rule, orchestrated by peasants who had been planning this moment since their grandfather's time. Chinese military records describe Yuan commanders receiving reports of rebellion from every direction simultaneously. It wasn't random chaos. It was coordinated annihilation. And here's the truly shocking part. It worked. The Yuan dynasty fell. One of the primary rebel leaders, a destitute former monk named Zhu Yuanzhang, rose from the chaos and seized the dragon throne. A man steeped in the cult's apocalyptic ideas had become emperor. But Zhu Yuanzhang knew the terrifying power he had just unleashed. The moment he secured the throne, he ruthlessly turned on his former comrades, banning the White Lotus and purging its followers. He used the cult to seize power, but he understood its lethal potential, and he was terrified that the millenarian ghost would come for him next. The real genius wasn't in massive rebellions. It was in surgical strikes that could decapitate the empire with a single blade. Imagine the terror of the Jiajing emperor in 1547, when palace guards discovered an intruder deep within the Forbidden City's inner chambers. This wasn't some desperate peasant who had stumbled past the outer walls. Imperial records tell of a cult assassin who breached the inner sanctum itself, the Forbidden City's heart. Picture the scene. The most secure location in the Chinese Empire, protected by thousands of guards, multiple walls, and security protocols that had been refined over centuries. And yet a single fanatic with a dagger had penetrated to within striking distance of the Son of Heaven himself. Archaeological evidence from the Forbidden City reveals the security modifications made after this incident. Additional guard posts, new checkpoint procedures, even changes to the palace architecture itself. The emperor's paranoia had literally reshaped the physical structure of imperial power. But here's what's truly terrifying. Wang Zheng wasn't working alone. Investigation revealed that Blood Sect members had been systematically infiltrating the palace staff for decades. Cooks, servants, even imperial concubines had been recruited and activated. The sacred fusion of the blood oath meant that a humble cook was now a bomb waiting for a timer to signal the apocalypse. The terror wasn't the dagger. It was the message. No emperor was untouchable. This wasn't random violence. It was precision terrorism designed to prove that no emperor, no matter how powerful, was beyond the reach of the Blood Sect's divine justice. Modern security experts studying this case describe it as the most sophisticated assassination attempt in pre-modern history. The level of planning, infiltration, and operational security required was centuries ahead of anything attempted in medieval Europe. Here's where it gets insane. The Blood Sect wasn't just fighting for political power. They were waging theological war against the very concept of imperial legitimacy. At the heart of their belief system was the eternal venerable mother, Wusheng Laomu, a cosmic deity who would send the future Buddha Maitreya to usher in a new world order. But this wasn't passive religious waiting. This was active apocalypticism. Their faith taught that the world was corrupt and dying, and only divine violence could cleanse it. Every emperor who claimed the mandate of heaven was therefore a false prophet, standing in the way of divine justice. Picture the psychological impact of this belief system. While Confucian scholars taught that rebellion against legitimate authority was the greatest sin, Blood Sect preachers were convincing peasants that killing the emperor was a religious duty that would guarantee eternal salvation. Chinese historical records describe Blood Sect members going to their executions, singing hymns and praising the eternal venerable mother. They went to their deaths singing hymns, convinced they were soldiers in a cosmic war between light and darkness. The cruelty lay not in sadism, but in utilitarian efficiency. This was systematic ideological warfare designed to undermine the psychological foundations of imperial rule itself. But the real genius was in the theology's adaptability. When one dynasty fell, the Blood Sect could simply declare that the eternal venerable mother had chosen new instruments of divine justice. The belief system was immune to political defeat. What's truly shocking is how close they came to actually winning. The White Lotus Rebellion of 1796 wasn't just another peasant uprising. It was the systematic dismantling of Qing dynasty power that lasted nearly a decade and drained the imperial treasury so completely that the empire never fully recovered. Imagine the sheer scale of it. While Napoleon was conquering Europe, peasant armies, armed with little more than farm tools and holy fury, fought the mightiest military in Asia to a standstill. This wasn't random violence. It was coordinated warfare, spanning multiple provinces and involving hundreds of thousands of fighters. The sound was like a grinding machine slowly destroying the Qing war effort, village by village, battle by battle. Year after year of relentless pressure that no amount of imperial force could completely suppress. Archaeological evidence reveals the sophistication of White Lotus military organization. They had established supply lines, communication networks, even primitive manufacturing facilities for weapons and ammunition. These weren't desperate rebels. They were a shadow state with its own military-industrial complex. Chinese military records describe Qing commanders facing an enemy that seemed to regenerate faster than it could be destroyed. Kill one White Lotus leader, and 3 more would emerge. Destroy one rebel base, and 5 new ones would appear. The horror wasn't in the individual battles, but in the systematic nature of the campaign. This was generational warfare designed to exhaust imperial resources and prove that the mandate of heaven had passed to the Blood Sect. Historians now call it the beginning of the end, the moment China's imperial myth began to bleed. The Qing dynasty survived, but its aura of invincibility was shattered forever. But here's the most terrifying part. They never really died. When the Qing government finally suppressed the major Blood Sect uprisings, the survivors didn't disappear. They evolved. The Heaven and Earth Society, Tiandihui, emerged from the ashes of the anti-Qing secret societies with the same blood oaths, the same cellular organization, and the same fundamental goal: overthrow the Qing, restore the Ming. Picture the transformation. What had been religious revolutionaries became criminal entrepreneurs, but they retained the organizational structure that had made them so effective against imperial armies. The same techniques used to coordinate rebellions across provinces were now being used to coordinate smuggling, extortion, and assassination across continents. Modern intelligence agencies call the Triads a criminal empire built on ancient rebellion. The blood oath rituals, the cellular structure, the absolute loyalty unto death, these weren't criminal innovations. They were military technologies developed by the Blood Sect over centuries of warfare against the Chinese state. The real genius wasn't in adapting to changing circumstances. It was in preserving the essential elements that made the Blood Sect so terrifyingly effective while finding new ways to apply them. Today's Triads are the direct descendants of peasant preachers who once believed they could bring about the end of the world through revolutionary violence. The blood still flows. The oaths still bind. And in the shadows, the ancient promise still whispers. These secret societies represent more than just religious extremism or criminal organization. They showcase a systematic approach to revolutionary warfare that was centuries ahead of its time. While European peasants were accepting their lot as divinely ordained, Chinese Blood Sect members were developing techniques for psychological manipulation, cellular organization, and generational planning that wouldn't appear in Western revolutionary movements until the 20th century. This wasn't just about making rebellion more effective. It was about understanding human psychology well enough to create unbreakable loyalty in the service of impossible dreams. The Chinese approach was systematic, scientific, and absolutely ruthless in its efficiency. The Blood Sect proved that the most dangerous weapon isn't steel or gunpowder. It's faith weaponized by brilliant organizational minds and deployed with surgical precision against the psychological foundations of political power. So the next time someone mentions secret societies, remember the sound of blood hitting wine in the dark, because that sound built empires and destroyed them. And in the shadows of modern cities, bound by oaths sworn in blood and fire, their descendants still whisper the ancient promise. The Blood Sect never truly died. It just learned to hide better. The blue sky is dead. The yellow sky will rise.